Hey everyone, welcome back to our channel. Here we learn new ideas and improve our English at the same time through stories. You practice English without feeling like you're studying. Just a quick reminder, listening is great, but repeating out loud is where the real improvement comes from. So feel free to pause, take your time, and say each sentence after me. Everything here is kept short and clear, so it's easier to shadow along. Don't stress about being perfect. Progress comes from repetition, not perfection. So let us start. I want to tell you something before I start. Indonesia was not a country I knew much about before I went. I knew it existed. I knew Bali was part of it. That was, honestly, about it. No research, no preparation, no plan beyond a return flight and a rough idea of which direction to walk when I landed. Looking back, this was both a terrible idea and the best possible way to experience a country that specializes in surprising people. Jakarta arrived before I was ready for it. The plane landed late at night, and from the window the city looked like it went on forever, which it basically does. Jakarta is one of the most populated cities on Earth, home to somewhere around 30 million people depending on how far out you draw the circle. And the moment you step outside the airport, you feel every single one of those 30 million people in some way. Not literally, but the weight of the city is physical. The air is warm and thick and busy with smell. The roads stretch in every direction with a confidence that suggests they have no intention of ending anytime soon. My taxi to the hotel took nearly 2 hours for a distance that should have taken 30 minutes, and my driver sat completely relaxed through all of it, occasionally honking not in anger, but in the friendly way. Indonesians seem to use the horn, more like a greeting than a complaint. I sat in the back and watched the city slide past the windows and tried to understand the scale of what I was looking at. I could not. Some cities are too big to understand on the first night. Jakarta is one of them. The next morning I woke up early, mostly because my body had no idea what time it was and had decided 4 in the morning was a perfectly reasonable hour to be awake. Since sleep was clearly not happening, I went outside, which turned out to be one of the better decisions of the trip. Jakarta in the very early morning is a different city from Jakarta at any other time. The streets near my guest house were already moving. Not with cars, but with people, walking and carrying things and setting up stalls and doing the kind of unhurried early morning work that makes you feel like you have accidentally seen something private. I followed the noise and smell for about 10 minutes and found a morning market. If you have never been to a Southeast Asian morning market, it is difficult to describe without sounding dramatic. Colors everywhere, stalls pressed together with barely any space between them, vendors calling out in a language you don't understand, but whose tone is perfectly clear. Strange vegetables and fruits in shapes you cannot identify, the smell of frying things, mixing with the smell of raw things, and the general warm smell of a city that has been awake for hours already. I walked through it slowly, trying not to bump into anyone, probably failing, attracting the occasional curious look from people who had better things to think about than a confused foreign visitor with no clear purpose. I stopped at a small stall where a woman was cooking over a flame with the speed and certainty of someone who has made the same dish 10,000 times. She was making nasi goreng, which is the Indonesian fried rice dish that is eaten at any time of day, but is especially popular for breakfast. And the smell coming from her pan was the kind of smell that removes all your other thoughts immediately. I pointed at the pan. She nodded. 2 minutes later, a plate appeared in front of me with fried rice, a fried egg on top, some sliced vegetables on the side, and a small portion of crackers called kerupuk that are light and crispy and taste like a very good idea. I stood at her stall and ate the whole thing. She watched me eat with the expression of someone who already knows the outcome but finds it satisfying to watch anyway. I gave her what she asked for, which was an amount of money so small I checked twice to make sure I had understood the price correctly. She had. I said, "Thank you," in Indonesian, which is terima kasih, and she laughed at my pronunciation in a way that was not unkind at all. We had no shared language beyond that. It was one of the nicest breakfasts I have ever had. I took the train from Jakarta to Yogyakarta on my third morning. The journey takes around 8 hours, which sounds long but turned out to be one of the better parts of the whole trip. The train was comfortable, and the seat by the window gave me 8 hours of uninterrupted countryside to look at, which I needed after 2 days of city. Java, the island that both Jakarta and Yogyakarta sit on, is extraordinarily green. The rice fields start almost immediately outside the city limits and continue for most of the journey, bright and flat and crossed by thin paths where farmers walk slowly between the rows. In the distance, at various points, the shapes of volcanoes appeared through the haze. Indonesia has more active volcanoes than any other country in the world, and from a train window, they look exactly as dramatic as that fact suggests. They just sit there on the horizon, looking enormous and permanent, and completely unconcerned about anything happening below them. I ate a snack I bought from a vendor who walked through the train carriage, watched the landscape move, and felt my whole body slow down for the first time since arriving. Yogyakarta, which everyone calls Jogja, because life is too short, is a city that feels like it is quietly very proud of itself and has good reason to be. It is the cultural center of Java, the place where traditional Javanese art and music and craft are most alive, and it carries this identity with a kind of calm confidence that makes the city immediately likable. I spent the first afternoon walking around the area surrounding the Kraton, which is the old royal palace complex that sits in the center of the city and is still home to the Sultan of Yogyakarta. Not a historical sultan, an actual current one. Yogyakarta has a real royal family in a real palace in the middle of a modern city, which I found wonderful in a way I struggled to explain. The street leading toward the Kraton is lined with batik shops. Batik is the traditional Indonesian textile art, made by applying hot wax to cloth and then dyeing it so that the waxed parts resist the color and create patterns. The patterns can be incredibly detailed, and the process requires enormous skill and patience. I knew I did not need any batik. I told myself this clearly and with conviction as I walked down that street. Then, a shop owner appeared at his doorway with a friendly expression and the relaxed confidence of someone who has had this exact interaction many times before. He said, "Come in, just look, no pressure." I said, "Okay, just a moment." 45 minutes later, I walked out with 2 pieces of batik fabric and a small batik shirt, and a very satisfied shop owner. The batik was genuinely beautiful. I'm choosing to view the whole thing as a cultural experience rather than a failure of willpower. I set my alarm for 4 in the morning the next day to visit Borobudur, and I want you to understand that I am not a person who sets alarms for 4 in the morning under normal circumstances. Normal circumstances do not include Borobudur. Borobudur is the largest Buddhist temple in the world, built in the 9th century from volcanic stone on a hill in the middle of the Javanese countryside. It has 9 stacked levels decorated with thousands of carved stone panels telling ancient stories. At the top sits a collection of stone bell-shaped structures called stupas, each one containing a Buddha statue inside. To see it at sunrise, you need to arrive in darkness, which means a 4 in the morning alarm, which means you are standing at the base of a 900-year-old stone temple in complete darkness, wondering if this was a reasonable decision. It was a reasonable decision. I climbed the stone steps in the dark with a small group of other early morning visitors, everyone quiet and slightly sleepy, the stone cool under my hands, where I steadied myself on the steep steps. At the top, I found a place to sit among the stupas, and I waited. The sky was dark blue and full of stars, and the jungle below was invisible in the darkness. Then the light started, the way it does, slowly and without announcement. First, just a lightening of the sky on one side, then color, pale orange, appearing at the horizon between two volcanic peaks in the distance. The mist was sitting in the valleys below like something that had been placed there carefully, thick and white and perfectly still. As the light grew, the temple appeared around me piece by piece, the carved stone, the rows of stupas, the detail in every surface. And below all of that, the jungle and the fields and the volcanoes going pink and gold in the morning light. I sat completely still for a long time. I had set an alarm for 4 in the morning, and it had been entirely, completely, absolutely worth it. I flew to Bali the next morning and arrived with expectations, which is always a slightly dangerous thing to do. Bali has a reputation that travels ahead of it everywhere. Paradise Island, tropical beauty, spiritual energy, rice fields and temples and warm sea. All of that is real. But the area around the airport and the main tourist beach strip, called Kuta, is, to be honest, not the paradise part. It is busy and commercial and full of shops selling the same things in slightly different arrangements, which was not exactly what I had pictured on the flight over. I walked around for an hour feeling slightly deflated, which felt ungrateful given that I was in Bali, but there it was. Then I got on a motorbike taxi and went 20 minutes inland, and everything changed. 20 minutes. That is all it takes in Bali to go from tourist strip to a version of the island that feels like a different place entirely. Quieter roads, rice fields on both sides, small family temples at every junction decorated with offerings wrapped in palm leaves, the air smelling of incense and flowers and green growing things. I arrived in the area around Ubud, which is the inland town known as the artistic and cultural heart of Bali, and immediately understood what all the fuss was about. The Tegalalang rice terraces are a short drive from Ubud, and are one of those places that look exactly like the photographs, which is rarer than you might think. Steep hillsides carved into steps over centuries, each level a different shade of green depending on where the rice is in its growing cycle, water moving slowly down through the system from one level to the next. The whole thing is managed by a traditional Balinese water-sharing community called Subak, which has existed for over 1,000 years and divides water fairly between all the farmers on the hillside, according to rules developed long before anyone currently alive was born. I walked down through the terraces on a narrow path between the fields and thought about the fact that this system, these rules, this community arrangement, had been working continuously for longer than most countries have existed. On my way back, I heard music before I saw anything. A particular kind of music, the sound of many metal instruments playing together in a rhythm that is complex and layered and unlike anything in Western music. This was gamelan, the traditional Indonesian percussion orchestra, played on bronze instruments of different sizes that together produce a sound that is immediately recognizable and difficult to describe to someone who has not heard it. I followed the sound around a corner and found a temple ceremony in progress in a small village courtyard. Women in traditional dress were walking in a slow procession carrying tall offerings on their heads, stacked arrangements of fruit and flowers balanced with a steadiness that suggested years of practice. The air was thick with incense smoke. Men in white and yellow temple clothing were gathered around the entrance. Nobody was performing for tourists. This was simply happening, the way it happens regularly in Bali, where ceremonies and offerings and temple visits are part of ordinary weekly life rather than special occasions. I stood at the edge of the courtyard at a respectful distance and watched for a while without speaking or photographing, which felt like the right thing to do. The gamelan continued. The procession moved slowly. The incense smoke drifted upward in the afternoon light. I had stumbled into something that was not meant for me and was not pretending to be, and watching it from the outside, with that understanding, felt more genuine than many things I had paid to see. My last evening I found a simple warung near where I was staying, and ate one more plate of nasi goreng at a plastic table with a plastic chair on a concrete floor with a ceiling fan moving the warm air slowly above me. It cost almost nothing. It tasted exactly right. I sat there after finishing and thought about the week. Jakarta and its impossible size. The morning market woman who laughed at my Indonesian and fed me the best cheap breakfast of my life. 8 hours of rice fields and volcanoes from a train window. A batik shop I never intended to enter. A 4 in the morning alarm that led to one of the most beautiful things I have ever seen. A temple ceremony I stumbled into on a back road in Bali. Indonesia has over 17,000 islands. 17,000. In 1 week, I saw 3 cities on 2 of those islands and thought I was seeing the country. I was not seeing the country. I was reading the first page of a very long and very good book. But here is the thing about a very long book. If the first page is that good, you don't put it down. You just keep going. I'm already thinking about where to go next time, which islands, which cities, which back roads. There is a lot of book left. I intend to read all of it. All right. If you made it through this shadowing session today, that already says something about your discipline. This repetition and consistency combination might look boring on paper, but it is one of the most powerful ways to build fluent, natural English. Keep showing up like this, and your brain will slowly adapt. Trust the process. If this helped even a little, consider liking the video or subscribing. It lets me know these sessions are actually making a difference. We'll catch up again soon. Take care till then.